Well, I'd like to welcome you to this Heart of America program where we will learn something about the work of the Select Committee to investigate constitutional revision. In 2021, the Urantia Book Fellowship's Triennial Delegate Assembly formally requested that the Fellowship's General Assembly appoint a committee to develop recommendations for rewriting or revising the Fellowship's Constitution. The intent was to develop proposed changes to be discussed and debated by the General Council and by the next Triennial Delegate Assembly. As requested, the General Assembly created the Select Committee to investigate constitutional revision. Today's program is timely because this summer in Kansas City, the 2024 TDA will be asked to provide its input on a series of recommendations that the Constitutional Committee will be suggesting. Heart of America's TDA delegate, Terry Boschert, and I, as alternate, are interested in your opinions both this evening and in the weeks ahead. I sent everyone a bit of information on the recommendations, including an explanation for why the committee believes recommendation number 1 is necessary. Also attached is a straw poll of General Assembly members on those 6 recommendations that was taken in February, and I can pull that up. Perhaps the language of some of the recommendations is a bit dated now, but tonight's guests, Tom Allen and Doug Burns, can bring us up to speed as they briefly discuss the committee's work so far. After they are done, we invite you to ask questions and even make brief comments. Tom Allen is the chair of the Select Committee to investigate constitutional revision. Tom grew up in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, and is a lifelong believer in Jesus and God, and since 1973, in the teachings of the Urantia book. As a 20-year-old college student, he became heavily involved in the First Urantia Society of Oklahoma, under the tutelage of Berkeley Elliott and others. Tom has served in many offices in the Society of Oklahoma and served one previous year on the General Council from 1985 until 1994. Tom is mostly retired as a registered nurse, but still teaches nursing part-time at Oklahoma City University. He serves on the General Council and chairs the Judicial Committee. Douglas Burns also serves on the General Council and is a prominent member of the Constitutional Review process. Doug grew up in Southern California in a Unitarian Universalist agnostic/atheist household. In 1976, at the age of 18, Douglas says, I had an awakening to God, and almost immediately after that, I was introduced to the Urantia book. Doug studied the book and nearly every subject presented within it for many years with different study groups, although his active study waned during those years when family and career dominated his time and attention. During the last decade, his spiritual hunger has reasserted itself, and he has begun with a new earnest to study the revelation with fresh eyes. He studies with the Walnut Creek, California group, and is a study group chair in the Golden Gate Circle Society. He also provides technical support to the Urantia Book Historical Society. Now, before we turn it over to Tom and Douglas, Barbara, I'm wondering if you could lead us in a prayer or meditation.
Thank you. Yes, as we gather together, be comfortable in the way that you like to connect with God within and Spirit without. And we'll have just a short prayer to start us off, followed by some silent, quiet time to reflect and then I'll close with a short closing for us to begin our meeting. Dear gracious Mother and Father, from paradise all the way through our Bantan to Narlashadek, to our local universe of Nevadon and our creative Son and Mother Spirit who guide us through all of our wonderful celestial helpers, especially our angels and the Master Seraphim on Urantia, to this planet, a small planet, fortunate to be the bestowal planet of our Creator's Son, Michael. As we gather as longtime friends and readers of the Urantia book with much history together, from the time we were children in some cases to the present, more than 60 years in some cases, please help us to be open to your best will and guidance for our group as we work with others around not only the United States, but also in Canada and other countries where the Urantia Book Fellowship has served and continues to serve from its beginning in 1955 as Urantia Brotherhood. It's a wonderful celebration to have this much time of success with this wonderful revelation that came in book form. And we open our hearts and our minds and our spirits to your will and wisdom as we consider not only the past, the present of our fellowship, but also the future, and everyone who knows and reads this wonderful revelation on Urantia, and all of our brothers and sisters yet who have not heard of it, but who experience its teachings every day through the planetary government and through those of us who are sharing these teachings around the world. May we take a few moments in meditation together and quiet contemplation within.
It's froze out in meditation.
And God our Father, we are grateful for your love in which we serve and live every day. So may it ever be. Amen.
Thank you, Barbara. And now I'm going to ask everyone to mute. And Tom, why don't you begin by giving us some background on the committee and its work, and then discuss its progress to this point. And Douglas, I will try to prompt you from time to time, but feel free to join in at any point. Tom, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dwayne. I'm so glad you've done this. It's really inspiring. I'm going to see if I can get my society to do the same thing. But soon. I think this is a really good idea to get you all ready to understand what some of the issues are going forward. Up until until we finally have the triennial meeting of the General Council, which will be in the 1st of August. It'll be after the TDA, of course. So what happened? The Heart of America Society was represented at the 2021 TDA. I think Gina I think Gina was the representative from your society. And so I'm sure, Gina, you well remember what that was like. And at that meeting, we unanimously recommended in a petition to the General Council that a committee be set up to investigate the revision of our Constitution. That after nearly 70 years, it's kind of time for some new ideas to find their way into how we can best structure our organization going forward, and to make it much more inclusive and make it a lot more fair. And the main thing is to make it a lot simpler. Because right now, that Constitution is not simple at all. It is full of all kinds of restrictions and active and inactive things that I think that we are really on board with CICR to really make it a document that can be easily used by the fellowship to streamline our activities. So we came together, and the General Council established the Select Committee to investigate constitutional revision. I was named as the chair, and that was 3 years ago, and almost 3 years ago, 2.5. But at that time, we got together diligently and began our work, knowing that it was going to be a very, very important thing. Very, very important for us to really come together and to structure a constitution that would be a lot more relevant to today's world. So you got to understand, though, what we are right now is we are still in the process of making these revision recommendations. Now, you have to understand that CICR committee is really just a committee of the General Council. We have no power other than recommendation. It is the power of the General Council to accept or reject any recommendations that we might present to them. So what we have done is, the first year we spent agonizing over what our purpose was. And by the end of that year, we kind of came down with a basic iterative purpose to live, learn, and share the teachings of the Urantia book. But that process is not finished. And later on, that might find some more deliberation by CICR as we progress. But then we decided, okay, now let's get into membership. Let's get it. I mean, we started getting into all kinds of issues about how we can make this fellowship more amenable to the members at large. Because right now we have members at large who really have no governance connection with the fellowship, other than the fact that they are members, and that as members they can actually be nominated and elected to the General Council. But that's really basically all the members at large have. So it became a guiding principle, basically unanimously in our group, that we needed to somehow find a way for members at large to be more involved in governance, much more than they are now. And so what we have kind of decided is really everything we do now is iterative. In other words, nothing is permanent. We are still in the process. You got to understand, we are just in the last leg now up to the TDA and the TMGC. TMGC stands for the Triennial Meeting of the General Council. We are just in the process now of really putting together something that we think that we can have the general council agree to in some form. Now, the way that this is happening for the committee is to have society conclaves. This is actually a sort of like a society conclave. And we've had 2 of them already, and I'm thankful for Barbara for setting those up. And at those times we went ahead and made some great progress in bringing forth some of our ideas. Then we met with the general council back in February. And at that time, and as you sent out, Dwayne, you sent out that some of our recommendations, some of them were very well received, and some of them obviously need some more work. So what we're really happy to do and to have from you all is to help us understand what we can do to improve this constitutional revision process. So I'd like to go ahead, Dwayne. Would you like to go ahead and call on the hands that are up? Oops, you're muted.
Yes, we have 2 people with hands raised. First, it was Barbara and then Douglas. Barbara? Did you
Yes,
want-
thank you, Tom, for giving me some credit for helping on the facilitation team for the society conclaves. But because we want all the societies to know what process we're using, the Wisconsin Society and First Society governing committees met in on January 5 to create a facilitation team for the conclave. So we now have 5 members from the 2 societies, and we are the co-hosts. But thank you for recognizing me. I simply help with the facilitation of that, but it is a society co-hosted process, and some people on the screen have been to those. But it's just good to share because we've had conclaves over the years since the 1980s of societies. But one of the things we've discovered in our review committee is that not everyone has the same experiences. If you weren't a member of a society, you might not have been to one. And we had COVID and haven't had too many. Well, this is the first one we've ever done on Zoom. So thanks for mentioning it, but please remember it's co-hosted by the governing committees of First Society in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I hope you organize some more of them. We need.
Okay, Douglas?
Well, to amplify what Tom was saying, particularly as it relates to recommendation number 1, last summer or last autumn, we received some legal help from Tim Duffy, which sort of enlightened us or sort of changed some of the things we were thinking about. Up until this point, we had been giving a lot of thought about tripartite model and some other models that were modeled after the Urantia book. But it was pretty clear that after talking with legal counsel that we needed to rethink some of that. And while we're certainly trying to build in checks and balances or power balances, however you want to call it, that are sort of a call out to the tripartite model. I think that we are not formally following that. We're more choosing a well, ultimately it's a corporate model. And and this is not a bad thing. This is generally a good thing. I'm certainly supportive of this. And what we're trying to do is have our board be the same as our governing council, or the general council and what was formerly the board be the same thing, so that there is greater united effort there. And so this is really where the recommendation 1 comes out of, is that work. And it was really a little bit of we had to sort of shift gears a little bit, so that took us a little bit of effort to do that. And that's part of why some of the stuff we're still working on is because we've had to kind of rethink and re-go through that. But it was a very valuable process, I think, overall. The other recommendations are, in some cases, a fallout of that issue. But I think the core issue here is having a single governing council, as opposed to having the EC, which had delegated powers. And so it doesn't mean that we won't have an administrative management team, but from a governing perspective, particularly as it relates to the legalities of Illinois law, will be a single body. And there's still things to be figured out about that. I think that the other point that Tom was making was simple, and that we're trying really hard not to burden the Constitution with a whole list of detail, particularly if you're familiar with the governing documents. The bylaw had all this specification in it. And so we're trying to move as much of that as possible to policy, so it doesn't require a constitutional amendment to update our management of the organization, which has proven to be problematic in the past, trying to get both either a constitutional amendment through the General Council or a bylaw change. And this is a fairly formal process, which doesn't always, and it doesn't lead to good policy all the time. And so by having the General Council be responsible for the policy, they can have a deliberative process. I misspoke. The new model that we're trying to consider is called a governing council, not the General Council. And by having a deliberative process there where policy will be put forward and developed there, we hope this to be a more streamlined and adaptive process to how the organization is run and how we can meet the various needs that are existing as we go forward with the revelation. Tom?
Yeah, we also hoping no, the one thing that does affect the Triennial Delegate Assembly directly is that we want to have, it is, like I said before, it's pretty much a consensus that we want all members to be able to vote for the governing council. Now, as you know, traditionally, it is societies at the Triennial Delegate Assembly who elect the general councilors. And we want to be able to include members at large in that process. So that leaves the societies in a place where they say, well, what's in it for us? Well, right, you would not, and some of our models, you would not be able to vote directly as in a TDA for general councilors, but you would still be able to petition the general council, which is the second arm of the TDA. There's election of the general council, and there's the petitioning process. So what we are trying to do now, and we have not come together on exactly what to do here. I want to make that clear, that we have not figured out exactly how to do this. But what we want to do is to include a bigger tent. Back in 1996, what's interesting, when you look at the history of the General Council minutes, a lot of the ideas that we are putting forth now were put forth back then. And we're just basically right now, we're just pulling together some of those ideas. And this big tent would include the affiliation of many, many other types of groups. Now, how we would organize that, the benefits that they would have, have not yet come together completely. But one idea that seems to be floating around pretty well is to have societies and affiliate groups meet annually to do all kinds of things with the General Council and helping to promote this wonderful revelation that we have into the world in a more efficient way. And we plan to keep working on this. And what we really want are some of your ideas about how societies can be better integrated into the fellowship without the ability to vote, be the only body that votes for the general council. If we had
Douglas,
direct elections, everybody would vote. Every member of every society and every member at large would vote for the governing council.
Douglas, did you have a comment?
Sure, I just wanted to add something here, which Tom sort of alluded to, is that the ideas that we're dealing with, in many cases, some version of them have appeared before. But the big difference now is we have amended, one of the things we've actually accomplished is we put forward a constitutional amendment to change how constitutional amendments are approved. So we went from a 3/4 vote to a 2/3 vote. And so this was an effort to, because traditionally a lot of constitutional amendments didn't pass. In fact, many changes, revamps of the Constitution in the past did not pass because 3/4 is a pretty high bar. And now this is based on good logic, and we tend to govern, or more correctly, we tend to conduct business by Robert's Rules of Order, and Robert's Rules of Order makes specific recommendations of this point. And so that's one of the things that I think is helpful to understand what's different about this time. The other thing is, to Tom's point about membership. This, there's not unanimity about this, but I think that the overall spirit here is about trying to involve all peoples who want to be members in the governance model. And so what's being proposed is a fairly big change to how we've done things. And, I think societies have they certainly, we want their voice. We want to hear what they have to say. There's a lot of opinion on this, so I don't pretend to represent any single opinion on this at this point. I think that the model that the group is choosing, that Syker is proposing, is a one person, one vote model. And that it's not unlike how like the Sierra Club or some other organization like that would vote for its board of directors. It would be very similar to that kind of model. And we would have some kind of election process. Now, I do think that we have not worked on defining what qualifies a person as a voter, and that needs to be clearly defined, because I think that the current data as it relates to, or the current selection of members at large, is not maybe precise. I also think that there is some question about the census within societies and about their members. So there will be some process to validate members for a voting process. Now, obviously, societies have some voice in this, and this is part of why we're here. We want to hear this. We certainly, welcome your participation in other forums. I'm a big advocate for the societies being able to have time to really think about this and really digest what this really means. I do think that there are arguments for moving away from the society model. Some of this is it pulls on my heartstrings, I got to say, but because I think that there is a value in the community model. But I think that what's the fellowship is moving to, or what probably is going to propose, let's put it that way, is different kinds of, communities or affiliated groups that can have different structures and different depths of organization. And there is value in this model. It's different than what we have. And I think this is one of those crucial things that we're going to have to, discuss as a total community, as well as within each of our societies.
Michael, I think you have a comment or question?
Yes, I just want to I'll be brief. In terms of a lot of the general outline of what's going on has been put out there, which is wonderful. I was just going to make the comment that it being talked about in terms of trying to expand the participation in the fellowship and in its governance. The concept of one person, one vote is moving forward, but then there is a I don't call it a qualifier to that. Doug mentioned it just briefly, that there's debate of how to set some sort of standard or bar for who is eligible to vote and who isn't, so that it's open doors for anyone who'd like to be a member and participate. But there is going to be, and it's not, again, it's not created yet, what the next level will be to actually be able to vote and participate in governance. That's a big piece of what's going on also.
Yes, and that was made clear at the February 24th meeting when we met, and there was some movement towards that very concept, Michael, and I think that's probably what we're going to recommend in the end. So wait and see.
Right. But we will probably, I mean, it's not decided, but it's been discussed that we'll probably contract with a service that does this kinds of things, because nonprofit organizations have voting all the time. And there'll be some process that we can do this through that, which then would, have, it just makes it probably, it adds integrity to the process. And I think that we'll probably do that. The specifics are not clear. There are other, many nonprofits have different kinds of voting structures other than one person, one vote. For example, some of them have weighted votes. We're presently not considering weighted votes at this time. We're considering one person, one vote. And and I think that's, it's been characterized as that's the most equitable and fair. I think that there are arguments that people who are more involved maybe should have more say. But I don't know that that's really getting a lot of, well, it certainly is not being put forward as a recommendation by Syker. This would have to be something that would be worked through otherwise. And I think, on that point, I think that what's also important to understand about the changes to the constitutional process, and this is important, is that we have to publish our constitutional amendments or changes 60 days before we meet on them. And during that period, there has to be a 45-day public comment period. And part of that is for us to sort of test our ideas so that if they do need to be amended, or if there is something that is needs to be modified for some reason, people have time to discuss this idea. And all these proposals will be subject to that process. And so it's very, very difficult to, in a first draft or in a final first draft, to get everything 100% right. And so there'll be some element of tweaking and adjustment that will happen. And Syker will probably collect those ideas, particularly the ones that we wish to endorse, and we would put forward as amendments when the final motion is put forward in there. So there is a time to comment on the final draft before it gets voted on by all members. And this is a very important, I think this was significant in Syker's work and bringing democracy to our process. Because before, basically, if you weren't on the general council, you didn't even get to see what was being put forward until it actually appeared in the general council. And so this is a really serious democratic process that Syker has put forward. And this public comment period is critical to encouraging the involvement of all members.
Tom, if I may, you asked earlier how you could improve the process. I'm probably one of the few people here who has actually started a nonprofit membership association from scratch and grew it to a national association of 3,000 members within a few years. That was a organization made up of people working in the financial services industry. I knew from the start that I knew the stock market, but I really didn't know how to run an association. So There is something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. I don't know if any of you, Doug is nodding his head, he knows. It's a cognitive bias in which people with, and I don't mean to offend anybody here, cognitive bias in which people with limited competence in a particular domain overestimate their abilities. There was a lot of people who were associated with me in the beginning who had big egos working, stockbrokers and such, that thought they knew everything, how to start an association. They really didn't. I had to hire a facilitator, an outside nonprofit marketing organization, to help us go through the brainstorming process and to come up with a strategic marketing agreement plan. I know there's a lot of I watched many of the sicker meetings, as you know, and I know that you have your heart in it. You really are trying. But there comes to a certain point where you don't have the knowledge to put together a good governance model. You know the book, you love each other, but you just don't know how to exactly put this new governance model together. So my advice to you, as somebody who has done it before, is to hire an outside party, and you may have to pay somebody for it, but it's worth it. And get Tim Duffy involved with that process. And it may even mean almost starting from scratch. Get most of the material that you've got gathered already and put something that is really going to work. One of the things that scares me, and I sent this to you earlier, and Sue, is again, this 24-member general council. One of the reasons why you probably move so slow is you've had 36 members. You're thinking about streamlining it down to 24, when most nonprofits your size have probably 7 to 9 board members, so that they can move quickly. And they have good board members that they've gone through a vetting process with, and they train those board members. So that's my 2 cents on how to make it better.
Tom or Douglas, any comments?
Well, I could speak to this a little bit. Well, first off, I agree wholeheartedly with you about the facilitator. I've advocated for this, but I think, we're going to work through our process as is for the time being. I think as it relates to the members, you're certainly not the first person to bring this point up, and we've certainly had this discussion at some length within the organization. And so then the point, I think, where we erred in the side of 24 was not so much that we're trying to become the most efficient organization, but that we're a democratic organization. And it's really the democratic part that we're erring towards. And I think that's really, it creates a tension. And I think that your analysis that 24 is going to be a lot harder to get a consensus or an agreement than 7 or 9. We absolutely recognize this. I think that one of the things we have put forward is that a quorum, a quorum vote, if meetings only can make a quorum, we have to accept decisions that a quorum group would make. And that would bring us into at least approximately, it'd bring us to 12 anyways. And because we're talking about meeting every month, and getting 24 people to meet every month is going, well, we'll see how easy that's going to be. I predict it'll be a bit of a challenge. I think also getting 24 people who are qualified, we hear you loud and clear on this point. I mean, it's not like we don't understand this point. It's difficult to get, obviously, people have varying skill sets. Part of the issue is that the term we're talking about is 2 years. And so while I wholeheartedly agree that we need to do training, I think, that's going to be a process where people are going to have to commit to more than one term in order to really get benefit from that training, I think. Because I think that unless you had experience, it's hard to come up in the first year and really understand all of the what's being asked of you. And then your term's over. So there's that issue. And that's one of the things that was put forward in the general council meeting, where we came to understand that a 2-year term was going to be preferable. Partly because of the turnover of the governing council, and AKA the board. And so these are issues that we're really trying very hard to strike a balance on and find the best way forward on
Well,
this.
let's go back to the subject of being democratic. Last fall or last summer, I had discussions with Sue about raising money for the organization. And she sent me out the survey that you folks did in 2020. I thought, great. I used to do that all the time, because you have to know what your members want, whether they're from societies or members at large or new people you're trying to attract. Say the nuns. I was shocked when I asked some of the leadership from the organization if you responded to the survey. And the response I got was, COVID happened. Well, I said, I can't go out and try to raise money for this organization, because the current membership is your low-hanging fruit to go to ask for money. If you're ignoring that membership, I can't go to them, Doug, and ask them for money because they have this complaint or they want this thing changed. And it was completely being ignored from the current membership. Now, what I see on the other hand is a lot of effort with the societies. You mentioned a few times, Doug, that the San Francisco Society was unhappy, and tell me if I'm wrong, with the way the SICR process was going. So
It has concerns. It has concerns. I don't wish to overly portray it as unhappy. It's concerns.
okay. Did you ever have any of them write written testimony with their names on that testimony, outline what their concerns were, so that Tom Allen and the rest of the committee could read them?
Well, I think
other than just pulling them out of the air.
Well, I sympathize, or I agree with your point. I think that their point of view is that they're trying to wait for real issues to respond to, because only to the last meeting were recommendations put forward that were decisions. So up until that point, it was all talk. They could start responding to things that are not even really being put forward. And I was cautioning them that this is where the conversation is going, but this is not necessarily the recommendation. And so we're just now at that process.
Well, tell me specifically, what were they concerned about?
Well, I think that the issue of changing the societies was probably the largest thing, but they weren't necessarily against it, but they weren't necessarily for it either. They were concerned because it was unclear how it was changing. I can't speak authoritatively whether they're against it or for it. I don't believe that they've actually made a vote on that issue in any particular way. It's change that they're concerned about, and that they weren't really informed. Now, First Society in Wisconsin put together the conclave in directly responding to some of these concerns, because societies were looking for information. We're just now at that point in this process where people are getting information and hearing the arguments being put forward by SICR about why these changes are necessary. And I think, some of this I reluctantly agree with, and some of this I don't. Some of this I enthusiastically agree with. you know, it's a mixed bag from my point of view. But I'm not in opposition to it. That's not how I am. I'm really more about, we need to come together about this, about agree together about this.
Doug, this process has been going on for almost 3 years, don't you think? You should provide, or any society should provide, any detailed concern or goals that they want for the new constitution?
Well, until the recommendations were put forward at the last general council meeting, nothing other than the constitutional change and the purpose statement had been put forward for any society to look at.
Tom or Sue, would anyone else like to comment on Thomas's concern? Barbara, go ahead.
Because this is the time when all societies are electing their triennial delegates and alternates, one of the processes that is underway, in addition to electing the delegates and alternates, is to start forming resolutions that will be presented at the triennial delegate assembly. So that is one way right now that every society can put forward their specific concerns or interests or whatever it is they need the general council to know. That is how we operate under our current constitution through this whole process. And that's the process that the societies are now engaged in through the resolution process, which is how this committee was created, was by a triennial delegate assembly resolution in 2021. And I was on the general council when that resolution was presented. Some of us were, some of us weren't, who were on Syker, of course, because we wanted a balanced committee of different experiences in the organization. So this is what the societies will be doing, is resolutions, very specific resolutions.
If I may, I'd like to go back again to the survey that was done in 2020. Why was that survey, that all-important survey, ignored in the process of putting this new constitution together?
How can you say it was ignored? I mean, the TDA said, hey, we need a constitutional revision going on, and that's what we're doing. And slowly but surely, we're putting together a dadgum good model.
Well, Tom,
And you might be surprised what comes out of it. Now, I know that 24 people as a board is more than is generally recommended. But what we have in plan, what we have in planning on is to have that board meet monthly and to then also have a management team within the board that takes care of the day-to-day. Now, that's what we're working on right now, but we have not finished it. But it's a model that we believe is going to work well.
So, Tom, to repeat that, are you saying that you did incorporate the concerns of the survey, the membership survey from 2020, into your process that you have been going on, that's been going on for the last 2.5 years in the Syker process?
Well, I mean, you're putting so much emphasis on that. I mean, we're moving forward. We had a meeting on February 24th, and we set forth some recommendations, and some of them passed by 2/3 majority, which meant that, hey, we're on the right path. And so we will continue to go on the right path and get some good feedback from everybody. So thank you.
Douglas, comment, I think. Douglas,
Yeah, so Thomas, I think that it's interesting. I was on the Golden Gate Circle board when that survey came out, and we had actually considered, we wrote a letter before that survey came out expressing our concerns about remaining affiliated with the fellowship as a society. We had actually written something to that. The survey happened, and I participated in that survey. I don't know that I would call that, I mean, I think the survey was useful, but I have mixed feelings about that survey. The survey has been discussed. It was brought forward. Many elements of it were part of our discussion, but there were many, many other elements also brought in, which for whatever reason took dominance. I think that the principal one was that they wanted to rework the Constitution almost in totality, which was part of it. They also wanted to make it simpler. And these were two sort of overwhelming components. There was also a general view that we needed to move away from the society model within the psycho group. Now, you can question all of the motives and or thought process on that, but that it was decided within the psycho group to do this.
Is
Now,
that
I think
why it
that-
was ignored, Doug? Because people wanted to move away from the society model?
Well, I think that there was an interest. I mean, well, a good percentage of the members are members at large, and they had voiced concerns or unsatisfiedness with the society model. The society model was generally viewed, and I think that this is beyond Psycher, that it has not been that successful, or certainly was failing. I don't view it that way, but there are those who do view it that way. And so, in combined with bringing or in franchising the members at large, it was looked, various different things were talked about, and we have talked about many different things, and at various levels of volume included, where we were working through how to do this. I'm not 100% on board with the model being put forward, but what I really want is I want the societies to speak up and argue for their point. Because it has to be somebody besides, a member on Psycher arguing this. This has to be societies really expressing their value to the organization and why we need to have that. This is one of the reasons.
Can I step in here for a second?
Yeah.
I think we're really just chewing on this one little point here, and I would like to, I guess, keep moving and talk about some other things also. But about this survey, Tom, if you see there's parts of it that had value, but they weren't pulled into the process somehow, it may be helpful for you to pull those out of that survey and submit that or put that forward somehow, so we can learn from that process, not only what's valuable, but maybe what was missed, and go forward from here.
Well,
I
I
do
guess
believe
what
it
I'd
was
like to see,
brought in,
Michael,
though.
is that the members at large, which make up most of your members, are heard as on an equal stance with the society members, which are a smaller number of members of the total membership. Further, most of your membership contributions are coming from non-members.
Well, members,
From what I understand.
well, I'll let Sue speak, but members at large are being, their issues being seriously considered.
Go ahead, Sue.
I don't want to take up too much time because I said I was only going to come as an observer and listener, and I really do appreciate everybody's comments and questions. And Tom has been asking these questions, and they're good questions, and he's got great experience. All I wanted to say about this survey is not that we're not putting a lot of weight in it, but just so everybody knows, it was 50 people that we talked to. And they were people that we considered leaders and experienced people in our movement who could really give us some insight into why we weren't growing and show us where the warts were. And we talked to every society that was an active society and some that were on the border of being active or have since become inactive. And we heard the same thing over and over again, which is, where are the new people? We need to grow. We need more members. We're not replacing ourselves. We're all getting old. It was just a variation on that theme over and over again. So we've been in a growth mode at the same time that we are in a huge transition mode. Just transitioning the office from Paula, who was just such a stalwart glue for the longest time, to Jeff Thies, who's an engineer, who's automating a lot of processes. I mean, we've had so much change management happening at the same time that we've actually been able to act on a number of things. We were informed of their importance in that report, producing an annual report, which showcased a lot of the things that people had asked about. It's true that a number of our donations come from non-members, not a majority, but more than you would think. And so we don't have a traditional membership organization because we have so many supporters who aren't members. We have almost as many members at large as society members. So you can't really apply the typical kinds of strategies you would use for a membership organization. But growth is the big part of the trajectory, democratizing what we do, making the revelation and people who want to be part of our organization easier to access. So it's something that we can scale globally more easily. And even fundraising, we're trying to democratize that. For a long time, it was, a couple of people that had a lot of money. And that's what started the entire Urantia Foundation. They needed people with money, to print the plates, print the book. But over time, we've completely shifted in what we need. And now we really need, everybody kicking in a little bit instead of a few people kicking in a lot. So there's some seismic shifts happening, and it's taking some time, but we haven't ignored the member survey. We've just been putting different elements into place as quickly as we can to address the biggest issues and the biggest opportunities, and trying to keep the sales up. So I think that the survey was really valuable. I did a lot of those interviews. When COVID was happening, people were available to talk. And so I was grateful that we could do some of these in-depth interviews. And we really got an earful from you guys, from the leadership, from the societies. But the biggest theme was growth. We need more people. We need young people.
Yeah,
So-
I'm sorry. So what did you determine? How can we grow the organization then? How can we grow membership?
Thomas, I'm going to give Barbara an opportunity to
Yeah,
comment.
sorry for the long turn. Thank you.
This is my Urantia Book Historical Society self-speaking, and also coming into the whole operation in 1965. I do want to just say that for publication of the book, the entire forum understood that they could not fund it by only a few wealthy people. They could have done that, but they did not. They really wanted it to be funded, and I know because Mrs. Kellogg was the one that led the fundraising, and she died in 1939. But some of the history that has yet to be published will really show the importance from the beginning, at least, of the forum and the way they started, both the foundation and Urantia Brotherhood, was to try to have small donations, medium donations, but not to depend on wealthy donors. I just wanted to say I think that's still a spirit that most of us have, but it's also part of our history.
Douglas, I think you've got a comment.
So I think that the issue of membership growing is key to a lot of this as a membership organization. And so one of the things that has happened historically is it's largely been a North American membership organization. And there really is, a lot of thought going through about how to make this a global membership organization. And I think that some of these changes that are being put forward are into that effort. And I think, how this affects the current members is certainly something we really need to hear a lot about. But I think that for whatever reason, and I'm frustrated by this, why membership in the North America is not growing at a good pace is a puzzle to me. I think that there certainly are readers going on in reading the book. And so members and readers aren't the same thing. And so we have to be clear about that. I think, though, for us to do work, and the fellowship has a very wide variety of services it offers. It's pretty diverse. And, it requires a lot of coordination and whatnot. And so we need members to join this. We have to think about what it means to actually have a global organization. And I think that's part of what's going on in this effort, is trying to make this so that we can incorporate people from all over the world. I think that's one of the reasons why the governing council is the size it is. So there's room for people from various parts of the world to be on it. And I think, we really want to have a much more global representation. I think it's crucial to our growth. I don't know that a lot of people argue this, although the practicality of this could be debated. I think that it's going to be a challenge. We have a very ambitious goal to take this to the world, and it's not underestimated by any of us by far. As it relates to the issue of membership, I believe that, which was a core feature of the survey, I think that is in fact a core component of what's being talked about, and was one of, I think, recommendation 5 and 6 address that specifically. And I think that, there'll be other proposals put forward to address that in more fine detail. And I think that if something is not being addressed as it relates to that, or something we should hear about it specifically related to membership, I would welcome any comment on this.
Sure. Does the organization have a strategic marketing plan with stated goals on how many members you want to add each year, Doug?
Well, this is a item of discussion. We do not have a strategic marketing plan as far as I know. We have had various strategic plans. The planning process is a subject of debate. We are incorporating that into our model going forward as a fundamental component. How that actually is going to work, I can't speak to in this moment, but that is clearly a very active item of discussion.
Okay, can I excuse my naivete here, but I am curious as to the extent to which a marketing plan is relevant to the constitutional revision process.
Well, I don't know that I spoke marketing plan. I said strategic plan, but I think it translates into marketing components. It could also be in service components. It could be in a variety of things about what we're doing. We do, like I said, we have a very wide array of services we offer, from publications to interfaith to international, I can't even name them all, education, conferences, a very wide variety of things that we perform, we do. And the strategic plan would encompass all of that, including membership, gaining membership or encouraging membership.
Did you have anything else to say? In a few minutes, I'm going to open it up to questions and comments from some of our members from Heart of America who are here. And let me ask also if there would be any merit in my screen sharing the recommendations or the straw poll, which I could do at any time if you think it might be useful.
If you're interested in them, sure. I mean, we can look at them. I can basically what I wanted to do is just tell you what the schedule is, where we're going right now. We're at about to begin the 1st of April. By the end of May, the 1st of June, we are going to have a constitution that is ready to go. Now, what will happen is, I mean, we're going to have one ready to be recommended. If either the executive committee or 12 members of the general council agree to submit our recommended constitution, then, as Douglas was explaining, there will be 60 days for us to discuss it and decide whether or not some of it needs to be amended. Then when the triennial meeting of the General Council occurs after the TDA, then those amendments will be on the table for the General Council to refine. And so that's our goal. That's what we want to happen. And that's what we're working towards. And we're working very hard. And I think you'll be pleased with what we come up with in the end next August. But do you want to talk about anything? So
There we go.
pick one. Douglas.
Yes, Tom?
Well, I was just say Douglas already spoke about the unitary board idea, the one we need to have a unified board. So that was the number one, and that's something we've got to have to be legally for indemnification purposes. So that was real easy. 427-0 against. Number two, you see, it was the board of directors recommended that the general council become the governing council, and that was abstention 6. We still need to talk about this and figure out how best to present our ideas for how that board of directors can be put together with a management team within the board of directors. So that's kind of our two-tier look right now. And we've gotten some good counsel from Tim Duffy and also our experience, because right now the executive committee is the board of directors right now of the Urantia Book Fellowship. And there's only 8 people on that. And so that's the way a board usually is done. But we have a concept of doing it a little bit differently, and we're going to see how that works out. But it was pretty popular there, and we're going to see how that goes. Number 3, the governing council composition. That was we thought about having 24 members serving 6 years with 12 counselors every 3 years divided. Well, we didn't end up with that because it was the last one there. See, recommendation that the members be elected 12 at a time every 3 years. Well, we decided that 12 was just too many. So that's why there's only 6 people for it. So we decided maybe let's do it every 2 years. Maybe that would be better. So we're thinking we're revising that one now too, and we'll come back with that in time to discuss it. Number 4, the governing council meetings. They would meet monthly. Now the idea there, I mean, what we have paring down the general council to 24 means that we're going to have 24 people who are really active and interested in getting this done. We're right now, there are some members of the general council that just really wear that title on their lapel and don't do much. We're going to get this down. We're going to really make sure that the governing council are full of people who are really dedicated to make this thing work. And there was 19 for it, 6 against, and but we're going to make sure that we understand that it's not going to definitely meet every month. It will be scheduled to meet monthly, but those meetings can be put off, changed, rescheduled, any way that we decide to do that. So, I mean, that's going to be coming down later too. By the way, we do have another meeting with the General Council on April 27th, where we will be going over some of our other recommendations as well. And we might go over some of these too. We'll see. Membership qualification. Well, this is actually, if you see that, it says any person who declares a desire and willingness to learn the teachings of the Urantia book and to abide by this Constitution of UBF shall qualify to be granted membership in UBF. Now, that is the exact wording that is in the Constitution now for members at large. So we thought we would expand that to anybody that wants to become a member can become a member. And it was 19-4, 6 against.
No.
Excuse me, 14, 9, and 6. Thank you.
This was a little bit of a contentious issue, but it passed on the voting.
Well, yeah, and it's also related to the idea of the alternate recommendation, to where once you the recommendation number 6, voting, recommend that all members be eligible to vote for the board of directors. Well, they thought, well, that's not a good idea. So an alternate recommendation came up in the general council to actually make it so that you would have to be registered to vote. And that was a lot more popular. So that's kind of where we stand with these recommendations for now. And we will, what do you all think?
I'm gonna let Barbara jump in now. I think you've got a comment.
I know how hard it is to technically be correct in presenting something like this. So I wanted to follow what we have in the conclave, and it occurred to me in our second conclave meeting, March 16th, that recording is available to everyone. And I'm really not sure if we mentioned that to Heart of America Society specifically, but if you want to hear the recording of that meeting, what I'm going to say is something that was important for everybody, including on Syker, once we did get legal advice from Tim Duffy. And I just want to say quickly that it's always been hard for people to understand Urantia Brotherhood and later the fellowship that survived the split of Urantia Brotherhood. But as Tim Duffy pointed out, our current constitution is a unified organization. We are not two organizations, we're one, and we need to operate as one. And I think the correction I would make is it's very clear that right now the General Council, the 36-member General Council, is the board of directors, even though we don't call it a board of directors. Just like in this new model we're proposing, the board of directors will be called the governing council. It's still a board of directors in Illinois law. So the 36 members of the General Council presently, that's the reason they have the authority to make any of these amendments. And I just wanted to make that clear, because our executive committee has operated as the board of directors for the Urantia Book Fellowship Corporation. And that's where it gets complicated. That's what we're changing, so that we would have a unified board with no subsidiary corporation working with an association. I think this is just my view, but I've told, I do think it makes it easier to understand the membership organization when we have the new proposed structure. That's why we're all in favor of it. But just to be clear, the current General Council is currently and always has been the board of directors of the fellowship and the brotherhood before that. And it's hard to understand, but I wanted to keep it so that there's no confusion from one meeting to another. But that came up in the second conclave meeting as well. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Douglas, you've got a comment?
Sure. I just wanted to, we do have a good reporting where we go through these issues in much more detail in the conclave, and that recording is available to society members. And you could message Barbara and we would make that available to you. And so that's there. I think the point that I guess, well, any comments on these issues I would welcome. But I think specifically comments on membership, if there are issues related to membership that people would like to either ask questions or maybe make a comment, I would really welcome hearing more about that.
Okay, I'm going to, we've been going about an hour and 15 minutes. Is there anyone else who has some questions, you know, some of our Heart of America people. You could,
I have a number of questions, but I'll just send you an email with those concerns. The big one on my mind is membership, and I have not heard any reference to the other organizations that are out there. I don't know if you've addressed that or if this is the appropriate place to do that.
Well, I can tell you that that is being discussed. We don't have a recommendation at this time.
Nick, what's your question or your concern?
There's a lot of people that read the book. We have other organizations. We still have the residual of the split that took place. So when we're looking going forward, is this constitution going to be flexible enough to incorporate all these groups, not just what already exists, but I'm going to guess that other organizations are going to form in various parts of the world. And is there some way to either join with them or to be an umbrella organization? And does our Constitution need to somehow reflect that?
That's a good question, Nick, because we do have a concept, like I said, the big tent. We want to bring in all kinds of organizations into the big tent for an annual meeting and really bring everybody together in that way that we can. So, you know, stay tuned and see how it plays out.
anyone else?
I'll join in one more time. My gut feeling, having not followed this at all, is that I'm not as optimistic as Tom is as to how ready we are to move forward on this. I'm not able to be specific at this particular time, but there's this I don't know feeling that I have. I don't know if that's the least bit helpful or not.
Nick, whatever comments you're planning on making in your email, could you copy Terry Boschert when you send those to me? He's going
Okay.
to, and he will be interested. I think you probably have his email.
I don't remember
I'll make
seeing the email. I got your emails, but I don't have the other surveys and the things that people are talking about. I have not seen them. So I'm coming to this from a really cold perspective. It's all brand new to me. And I would have a beginner's reaction to it.
Okay, and Terry is going to be our delegate, so he will be interested in your comments too. Oh, well, if you check the chat, Nick, you will see Terry's email address.
I
Yeah,
got
well-
to leave, but thank you all it's been very interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it evolves.
Well, what's really important is for us to really keep talking about this and to make sure that everybody does know what's going on, because we cannot keep this in our little psycher container. We have to let everybody know what's happening. And we are evolving. We are a little caterpillar in a cocoon that's getting ready to come out as a butterfly. So yeah, I'm positive. I am, but you know, you got to be. And it's really dependent upon the leadership that we have and upon the enthusiasm of the people that we can get involved. My gosh, look at Adam and Eve. When they came, they had a whole garden full of volunteers. Let's make this happen. You know, we need that same spirit. We've got to do that. We got an epical revelation here to bring to the world, and we want to do our part to make this an organization that does that. And so, come on, let's join in, be a part. I'm a cheerleader too.
Right. I would like to.
Sounds good. I need
I
to
would like
run,
add-
everybody. Thanks,
Okay.
everybody, for being here.
Thank you.
I would like to add that if there's any questions or comments that you send them to Syker. Tom would be probably the best person to send them to. Tom has a clear policy of sharing all that within the group, and we discuss so that these issues brought up by members are at least we're aware of them and are discussed as appropriate. So any questions and or thoughts, concerns, ideas, hopes, wishes, and any effort you wish to volunteer and really helping other people understand. We would love to have your participation. I also want to thank Heart of America for giving us the opportunity to speak today. It was quite an honor, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dwayne. Terry, everybody.
Thomas, did you have any more comments?
You're muted, Tom.
No. No, I don't.
Okay,
My email is in the chat, if anybody would like to come back to me. Anyway. And I would like to thank you too, Dwayne and Terry, for all of you all to have invited us to do this, and we need to do more of it, and we will definitely be in touch with you as things progress. So thank you very much.
well, I thank you and Doug and everyone else who has participated in this discussion for coming here. But Terry, Clint, Don, Blair, haven't heard from any of you. And any comments?
I do not. I mean, I'm kind of, this is pretty new to me too. And I'm kind of glad I'm not responsible for coming up with constitutional amendments. But my hats are off to, my hat is off to Tom and Doug and all those who helped clarify and enlighten me.
Terry?
I thank you as well. I'm still feeling like I'm trying to get a grasp on the way things are today and the way things we want them to be. Appreciate the thoughts, and I'll ponder those, as well as hope to talk to more people about them as well. Thank you.
Well, you know, very few people are really interested in a constitution. It's just like, hey, come on, I just want to get out and share the book. I want to get out there and live, learn, and share the teachings. I don't care about an old dang constitution. You know, that's pretty normal for a lot of people. But there are those of us who realize that you got to have a structural basis for what you do. And of course, they're trying to put together something that is as simple as possible and yet is effective. And I believe we'll succeed.
Yeah.
Dwayne, I guess I'd have another comment. And that is just that I was moved by the suggestion that this process, despite the fact that we have some very smart people here with a very long history in the Urantia family, having an outside consultant just for perspective, who sounds good to me. They'd be able to see things, I'm sure, that folks who are part of the organization for all this time maybe are blind to.
Well, we do have excellent legal advice, and he's been very helpful, and we believe we're on the right track.
Okay, I'm going to end the recording right now.